Well, smaller group than I was hoping for, but that's all right. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about standards reference grading, maybe answer questions that you have. So between Keaton and I, will probably take about 15, 20 minutes, and then feel free to come ask questions or ask questions for the whole group. I covered a little bit at the open house last time where we talked about kind of standards reference grading versus traditional. And one of the big reasons we are going to standards reference grading, as is the majority of the country, is it really targets what kids know. It targets the learning as opposed to the teaching. So that's been the whole goal, is to really focus on what should kids know and be able to do when they leave our school. In a traditional system, you graded everything. You graded homework, you graded quizzes, then you graded tests, and then you come up with a grade at the end. You could downgrade kids based on attendance. You could downgrade them on attitude. You could downgrade them on late work. What we realize is none of that has any impact. It has an impact on who they are as a person. It may impact their employment, but it has no impact on what they know and are able to do in a standards reference world. We really want to go to what does a kid know and what is he able to do. So that's kind of the impetus for us changing to a standards reference grading system. The part that I'll cover, I gave you 2 handouts. If you've not got them, you're welcome to come up here and grab them. The one called Standards Reference Learning Parent Guide, that's put out by our district. And that kind of covers in depth what standards reference grading looks like. The other side, the other packet, much thinner, is kind of what I put together and what I'll go over right now. So you start to learn the vocabulary, because there's a big difference in the vocabulary of standards reference grading as opposed to a traditional grading system. And that's what I want to show you, and then Keita will also show you what it looks like from a parent perspective when you log on. So I guess the first thing I'd like to do is draw your attention to that first sheet where it says standards, outcomes, and components. Those are all terms that you're going to hear your child talk about. And so real briefly, the description falls behind it. Standards are performance strands that are consistent across the state. So the state of Wyoming has adopted a set of standards in each content area. These are the things we think kids should know and be taught. Boom, 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 boom. That's statewide. All the public schools in the state of Wyoming fall under those guidelines. And I have a sample of that in the packet in a second. The next level down from standards are outcomes. Outcomes drive our education and our teaching. The outcomes is what we're guaranteeing that we are teaching to your child and what we expect them to learn. Those outcomes are the only thing that receives a grade. They're called district assessments or outcome assessments. The reason we call them that is they are consistent across the district. Bighorn 8th grade math is the same as Tongue River 8th grade math. It does not change. We have the same curriculum. They've written the curriculum together. When they make adjustments to the curriculum, they adjust it together because we want consistency. That's another big thing about standards reference grading. Because we have the standard and we have the outcomes the same, we know that the education Bighorn is providing is the same as the Tongue River education that's being provided. That's really kind of important. I'll give you an example of what it was like in Laramie when I taught in Laramie a long time ago. There were 7 of us in the social studies department. There was actually 9 of us, 2 were psychology. The other 7 of us taught history and government and geography. We all had our own grade scale, and we all taught what we wanted. I focused a lot on the Holocaust because that's an area that I really enjoy studying. So that was a big, huge part of my curriculum. Industrial Revolution wasn't a real big thing for me, and so I didn't cover as much. Dan Ruley, phenomenal teacher right across the hall from me, was into movies. 3 times a year, they took kids down to Denver. They went to the theater. He showed movies nonstop, and it was in-depth. It wasn't like just turn the video on and, just have the kids watch. It was really intense stuff, but that was his gig. Keith Smules down the hall, another great teacher. His was frontier history. He loved the western side, cowboys, Indians, settlement to the west. So he focused all on that. We all graded differently. Dan Ruley, 90, 80, 70, 60. Very, very traditional. Keith Smules, he was a William Glasser fan. And that was A, B, or F. A, B, or F is all you could get. Either you really get it, or you don't. That was it. 87% was the low B. That was his classroom. I was A, B, C, F. I felt like a D meant you had a pulse, and that wasn't good enough. And so that's what I did. I was 90, 80, 70. Eventually I changed to kind of a 7-point scale. And I went 93, 86, 79. We were all over the board in the exact same school. And so it wasn't equitable. The kids that Dan Ruley taught were getting a very different education than what they were getting with me versus Keith Smules or Roger Clark or any of those guys. Not that we weren't doing a good job. We all thought we were pretty great teachers. But it wasn't consistent. It really depended on who you got as your teacher as to how the class was going to be. In a standards referenced system, the curriculum is viable and it's the same for everybody right here. So I may still have the Holocaust as my pet project, but I'm guaranteeing you I'm going to teach all these things. These outcomes don't change. Doesn't matter what teacher you have. Now we only have one teacher in our building for each content area. But if we had 6 or 7 like I had in Laramie, all 7 of us would be teaching this. It's trying to get to that consistency. So those are outcomes. And then we have components. Components are below the level of outcomes. They're what get us to the outcome. It's your daily stuff. It's the quiz when they walk in. It's the homework that they're doing. It's the daily stuff. And you have a lot of flexibility in that. If the teacher, if Shannon Moline, who teaches language arts middle school, the Bighorn side, wants to get to outcome 6.1 by doing a play or reading some poetry, awesome, knock yourself out. If Ashley Mines wants to do it a different way, and she can still get to the same outcome, great. She has latitude to do that. Now, they do talk to each other once a month. They talk about what's working for you, what's not. They don't have to be exact in that, but the outcomes can be exactly the same. We will teach to that outcome. And so it really guarantees a viable curriculum across the board for us, but we don't grade the components. And the reason we don't grade the components is they're learning tools. They're called formative assessments, and so that's also on your list there. A formative assessment does exactly that. It informs where my kid is at on any given day. If we're doing a quiz and I get 5 out of 10, in the traditional system, we block that in. And then we would add it to the next assessment that we did, or the next quiz that we did, or the homework that they did. We might take off 10% for being late. And I did 20% for 2 days late. I just did 10% until they got to 50. That was just how we did it. But that didn't measure what they knew. So those are all things we don't want to add into their final grade. We simply want the outcome assessment, which is summative. It's a collection of everything we've done in that particular unit